Hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to our show tonight. It's live in your face. I'm Perry.
I'm Remy.
And we're coming from a residential location.
A different
location, an undisclosed location that we may be recruiting, we may be showing from for the foreseeable future as we are exploring new locations and opportunities to talk about what we talk about. So expect things to change as we move forward, and we'll just go from there. No. What are you doing? Oh, you're
trying to get my
do that too.
Phone to do the things so I can see the people. Hi, baby.
So welcome to the show, Jonathan. All right. So tonight, our headline tonight is we're going to talk about why men need to be happy in order to get all they want. But we're going to start, as we usually do, with some news, because the news is relevant to the show. And so the first bit of news that we want to talk about relates to trans men. Actually, there's a couple of trans men in the news.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is a actor who was
Still a thespian.
hired to play the lead role in a new show coming out called Relish. It's a sci-fi action thriller, and he is playing the lead role of a trans man in the show.
That's awesome.
Yep, who is leading a team of people who misfits, I think they call them, or outcasts, who are escaping an institution where they are apparently held against their will. I think this is the second actual transgender actor who was hired to play the role of a transgender person in a film. The first one was, I don't remember the name of her name, but she's out of South America, and she's actually, there's words in the rumor mill that she's going to be nominated for an Academy Award for her performance as a transgender woman in a love affair situation. Remember that show?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, can you scoot over a little bit? I'm like not in the camera. There.
You don't need to be in the camera.
That's better. And let's pull it down a little bit because it's just showing too much ceiling. There, that's better. Oh, yeah. All right. So yeah, that's pretty interesting, especially coming on the heels of all of the hubbubaloo in Hollywood of how Hollywood has been not neglectful, but unwilling to hire transgender people to play transgender roles in the movies. So times are changing, and as we've always said here on the show, if you wait long enough, everything works out, and this is a good example of that. Another article in the news is about yet something else out of Hollywood. Yet another trans man, whose name is Yancey Ford, is a film director and producer, and he may be nominated for an Academy Award also.
That's another amazing story.
Yes, for his film Strong Island, which is a documentary about his brother, who was the victim of manslaughter or murder, was it?
Something. You've got the thing.
Yeah, I think it was manslaughter.
Hello, Kendall. Devin, try rebooting, maybe. Opening it again. Hi, Tamar. Welcome.
Welcome, Tamar. And so, so we've got two really great pieces of news coming out of Hollywood, as well as some good news coming out of the military. So this will probably be the last mention of the transgender ban tweet from President Trump relative to this story that's coming out in Oceanside, California. Oceanside, California happens to be a city adjacent to the largest Marine Corps base on the west coast of California, if not in the nation. And this city passed a resolution recently to support transgender service members, coming on the heels of the lifting of the ban, which occurred on January 1st of this year. Actually, it wasn't a lifting of a ban. It was an injunction of a proposed ban on January 1st, which allowed dozens of transgender American citizens to join the military, predominantly in the Air Force. But this city, Oceanside, passed a resolution for their town where they would openly support transgender servicemen. And the reason why this is important is because Oceanside is the playground of Marine Corps servicemen who, when they're not working, go out and play. So it's a really great measure or effort or gesture of support of a major city in California to support the transgender service people. That's really great.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Welcome, Lauren. Glad you could join us.
And then one other bit of news, I think. Oh, so this next bit of news, and there's trigger warning here. We've been educated to make sure that the trans women or other trans people who are watching our show know that we're about to talk about something that could be triggering. So
yes.
Trigger warning. We're going to be starting a new series here as part of this show called How to Read the News or How to Interpret the News. And our first bit of conversation in this regard is relative to this crime that was committed back in 2017 in the spring, where this transgender woman was apparently killed by a 19-year-old man who has since been charged with manslaughter for the killing. And do you want to talk a little bit about what happened here since you just recently read the article, or shall I just keep
Go for it.
Okay.
You and I just read it at the same time.
Yeah, we did, basically. So this guy, so
see what I deal with?
the point of bringing up this article, and it's related to all the transgender women who've been killed throughout the last 2 or 3 years, is how do you interpret these types of articles? Do you shake your head and say, there goes another one? Do you shake your head and say, men just can't treat trans women right? Or do you shake your head and say, see, I'm right, society hates us? Or do you look at these type of events as in a more positive light?
Right, which isn't, in some cases, and in most of our stories, isn't necessarily an easy thing for us to do immediately.
That's exactly right. And this is where the work comes in, because
right.
I guess you could say that this is advanced work, because usually when we read something that's negative about the people that we identify with, like for myself, example, reading about African Americans, it's really easy to personalize the thing you're reading about and then have a knee-jerk reaction about that, which causes you to form an attachment with the thing you're reading and thereby bring more of that into your life experience. So one way to read these types of stories in which this guy, Ken McFadden, was found, was charged with this trans woman's death, is to say, wow, isn't it great that the justice system seems to have found the person who murdered this person?
Right.
Or I guess murder's not the right word. Killed this person. Isn't it great that we have people who are dedicated to finding out or getting to the bottom of these types of crimes? Isn't it great that this sort of discovery, the fact that this person is being charged, could lead to greater efforts to pursue and persecute those people who are murdering, or in other words, killing, I should say, because this one isn't a murder, it's a manslaughter charge, trans women. And so
isn't it great that we're getting coverage in
Excellent.
the news at all? You know, there's so much comments made that the news pays no attention. Well, they're paying some attention.
Excellent. Isn't it great also that they are identifying the victim with the right pronouns instead of calling her something else that she's not? So there's lots of things that one can read into even the most negative article and walk away with at least a neutral story, if not a positive story. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Devin. Murder is not the right word. And by the way, all of these articles that we're referring to are posted on the Transamorous Network Facebook page in the post section, smattered amongst the thousands of advertisements we posted about the show. Trying to get you guys to show up. Just kidding.
And you're here.
Yeah. So there's plenty of opportunity in any situation that you're experiencing, men, to come up with a positive interpretation of the experience you're having. Why is that? Why is it important, Remy, for men? We're leading into the theme of our show tonight. Why is it important for men to have a positive perspective on the experience that they're having, no matter what that experience is. Because
say it again.
why is it important, given the theme of our show, which is men, you've got to be happy.
Right.
Why is it important for men to have a positive interpretation of an experience that they're having, no matter what the experience? Why is that important?
What's important to what the end results are, where you want to be, the happiness that you want to live your life in.
Absolutely. Because to the degree that you find something positive to conclude from the experience you're having, you're not forming the negative attachment to that experience and thus bringing in more of the negative experience you experienced. So, for example, last night I was having a conversation with a transattracted man who was talking about his beliefs relative to trans women. And some of the beliefs he had was, number one, in order for you as a man to attract trans women, you have to look like Idris Elba. Do you know who Idris Elba is?
I do.
Yeah. Handsome devil, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
He's very handsome. And so this guy was saying, if you don't look like that, you're not going to attract trans women. He also said that in order to attract trans women, he has to open up his wallet.
Oh.
Another belief he had was, in order...
What kind of girls you been meeting?
I know, right? He also said, in order for me to meet and have relationships with a trans woman, I have to look different than how I look.
That's a deep story.
It is a deep story.
It's a deep story about yourself.
It's a story that has nothing to do with trans women, isn't it?
It has nothing to do with anybody but you and how you feel about you.
That's exactly right. And so all of these stories that this guy I was talking with last night point to, if you believe that your stories or your beliefs create your reality, you can see how this guy would, number one, go places where he's going to meet shady trans women, which he does, and meet trans women that are not of the type he would prefer to meet. Instead, he's meeting trans women who are at the same level as he is, who have low self-esteem, who are looking for all kinds of other motivations other than the wholesome ones from relationships, like sugar daddies and six-pack abs. That's a cliche we use, but you get the point we're saying when we use that phrase. And so he's complaining about meeting trans women that don't meet the criteria he wants to meet. And he also believes that while he believes he's kind and loving towards trans women, he also has this opinion of himself.
Conflicting stories.
Yes, Remy.
Deep
conflicting stories. And you know, like you said last week, if you start scratching the surface of your stories, you will find down at the very bottom, usually stories about yourself that are conflicting with what you want.
Yes, right. Conflicting what you say you believe and what you
actually
believe.
Preach it. And so this is why, for example, we say your stories are so important, and why we're saying tonight that if you want to find the transgender lover that satisfies the wildest dreams you might have in having a relationship, you have to be a happy man. And imagine, if you're out happy and having a good time, you're probably confident. And if you're confident, you're probably not out desperately seeking anybody. And if you're not desperately seeking anybody, you're giving off an air, a sense that you are all right with the world. And if you're in that space as a happy man, you're probably attractive to women, no matter what kind of women we're talking about.
All right. Confidence is one of the sexiest things out there.
That's exactly right. Now,
no matter how you look.
Exactly. Well, we talk about in the Man's Guide how whichever one of it was either Siskel or Eberk. I think it was Siskel.
Hey, Medina. Welcome.
I think it was Siskel who was the larger gentleman. And Siskel was white, and he also weighed 300 pounds. Mm-hmm. And he met the woman of his dreams, who happened to be African American. And what she said about meeting him was he was so confident, his appearance had no relevance on what she was looking for. She fell in love with who he was, not how he looked.
There you go.
And so this is the thing, man. If you want to attract the trans woman of your dreams, you have to start with having stories that have you be in a happy place. And when you're happy, you're exuding confidence. When you're happy, people want to be around you. And when people are around you, you come off as attractive. And when you come off as attractive, women want to find out more about you. And when they want to find out more about you, guess what? They tend to find out that you're an interesting guy, if you're an interesting guy and you have your stories right. So, of course, after this conversation with this gentleman last night, I directed him to the Man's Guide to Finding Your Ideal Trans Woman Partner. I'm getting the name wrong.
Man's Guide to Finding Your Finding Your Transgender Partner.
Yes, to Finding Your Transgender Partner, because in the guide we talk about how to cultivate stories that lead to you becoming a happy person. By the way, everything we're talking about with regard to men also applies to you trans women.
And everybody.
I was just going to say, and also cis women who might be interested in trans women, or cis women who might be interested in trans men, or men who might be interested in trans men. Everybody.
Everybody.
Yes.
Regardless of who you are or who you're attracted to.
You
to be truthfully.
Yes.
It applies to everybody.
Yes. You change your story. And this is the thing, Remy also talked about kind of the transformational nature of this work as it applies to all of your life. As you work on your stories to find this transgender lover of yours, not only does your relationship life change, but everything in your life changes. You might find yourself in a different job, a better job. You might find yourself with a different set of friends, better friends. You might find yourself more confident. And as a result of that, meeting all kinds of new people who might change your world and change your life. This is why we say your stories create your reality, because they do.
Yes.
So let's take some comments, if there are any.
There's a whole bunch of comments.
All right, great.
So you've just been on a rant.
I've been on a rant. What do we got?
How far back do you want to go?
All the way back.
Missed all of
Let's
them.
go all the way back. Welcome to the show, everybody. 34 comments. That's remarkable.
Let's see. Devin starts by saying that she's having a hard time seeing it that way. This goes back to seeing the news, such as like the murder or manslaughter, in a positive, seeing it in positive ways. Right? And Jonathan says, I agree with Devin. I'm having a hard time seeing it that way as well. That comes from having loved ones murdered in their homes.
So let's stop there and talk about those. So on every Friday we have a sister company that runs these online workshops for people who want to find out how to implement what we talk about in their daily lives. And one day, one of the participants in that group came to the meeting. It was apparent he was despondent, and this was on New Year's, and he was despondent because on New Year's Day his father died 4 years ago. So this is relative to what Jonathan just said, and where he was remembering the loss of his father and the fact that his father isn't there now. And so we started to talk about this situation, about about his feelings toward the death of his father. And where we got was his feelings toward the death of his father are the result of momentum from an interpretation he had when his father actually died. And so he's interpreting an event that happened 4 years ago in the now, and that interpretation is creating the negative experience, the negative emotions that he's having. So then we went through an exercise that we typically go through in this workshop on Fridays, and as a result of the workshop, he found relief from that negative feeling, and the rest of the day, he said, the rest of his day was way more positive than the first half of his day. And so my point in sharing this story is, it is possible, Jonathan and Devin, to change the perspective you have about reading negative news. But, like Remy has said often about this work, it takes work.
It does.
You have to first realize that you have to counter the momentum of the negative stories that you have that have you interpret news like that in a negative way. I mean, like we talked about last week. What were we talking about? About how society... Oh, breakups. Last week we were talking about how society has trained us to believe that breakups in relationships are bad and sad and tragic. And in the same way, we are trained in our society to believe the same thing about murders. And it may be hard to accept this, but there is very little tragedy in the experience of a murder, except the tragedy that we bring to the interpretation. Now, we can't go far into what I just said. If you want to find out more about that, join us on our Friday afternoons. They happen at 1 o'clock. on Skype, and we can go very deep into this, and you can participate in the exercise too that will give you profound relief, Devin and Jonathan, from the experience that you're having of reading these type of news stories and coming away with a negative interpretation,
Right.
which creates the attachment to you having more of those interpretations in the future. What other comments do we have?
You're in the same area.
Yeah. So focus on something.
Troy says we have to take responsibility for our behaviors.
Yes.
Lauren agrees. I also agree.
Yes. And an interpretation is a behavior, a practice behavior. Even though it feels like just like almost like an automatic reaction, the behavior of interpreting negatively has been practiced to the degree that it's automatic. Mm-hmm. And so that behavior can be changed just like any other behavior.
Devin says that she knows where he's coming from. I have a lot of those stories that I'm working on changing. Good job. And we've talked about this ourselves, Devin and I.
Oh, great.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
About her changing some of her stories and the results that are coming forward. Even the little ones at first, right? It's acknowledging those first little things. Those things that, make you go, oh, huh, okay, cool. And then you just kind of keep going.
That's exactly right.
And next time you go, oh, that's even more cool. And then it'll become, like, directly personal.
Absolutely. I was having a one-on-one conversation in a similar conversation that we have on Friday, but in a one-on-one context with a client today. And we were talking about how she eats things she doesn't want to eat and then feels guilty about eating them afterwards. So she has this behavior that's been practiced that's associated with eating. And after we did an exercise which allowed her to realize a different story about her eating habits, and she gained relief from her guilty feelings, she did exactly what you said happens, Remy. She discovered that underneath the guilty interpretation that leads to guilt around eating, she discovered that she has a series of beliefs around eating that are based on lack, that are based on poverty, that are based on unworthiness. Mm-hmm. And those stories are the
deep-rooted stories that have manifested over these years in a specific way, in her instance.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And we all have these stories that we are struggling to get to, but the only way to get to those stories is to start at the top and just start peeling them away one by one and unraveling that knot.
That's right.
Until you get your web nice and clean.
That's right. And then you can start replacing that. You can put on that clean foundation, new stories, which create the reality that you want. Because here's the thing. Notice now, this person we were just talking about, she has these 3 deep-seated stories, and probably some more. And then on top of that, she has this behavior that causes guilt when she enacts the behavior. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, she is heavier than she would prefer to be. And so when she looks in the mirror, in addition to eating things and feeling guilty, she looks in the mirror and feels even worse about her, which perpetuates
It's a horrible cycle.
Yes, Remy, that's right.
Horrible cycle.
That's right.
But we all have a cycle of some kind.
Of all kinds.
We all have our own cycle of something. Something makes us do something, which results in us feeling a certain way, which causes us to feel a different way because it's not the way we want it to be, and it becomes this big circle that we continue to put momentum into, this negative circle over and over and over again until you break that pattern, until you can stop putting the momentum into those stories and unraveling that and finding out what's underneath it and re-editing those stories.
So here's what's great about what Remy just said. If all of us isn't it logical that if all of us have stories that have created the kind of situation we were talking about with this woman, and I'm sure each of you who are watching have similar stories that have created similar negative results in your life, isn't it logical that if you are able to change all of those stories or replace them with positive ones, that you would have an accumulation of positive outcomes equal in magnitude to the negative ones that you have? Isn't that logical?
Logically, absolutely.
Yes.
So why is it that we have such an illogical reaction to even just hearing that?
Yes.
Even just hearing Perry say what he just said is like, oh, that's...
It can't possibly happen.
Can't possibly happen.
Yeah.
Well,
I can't change
why
my
not?
beliefs and then have a beautiful life. Why not?
Why not?
Because you can. You've already demonstrated to yourself that the constellation of beliefs that are producing the life you have has produced the life you have. If you believe what we're saying, then there's no reason to believe that that can't happen in an uber positive framework. There's no reason. And so to me, when we talk about this stuff, it just seems super logical. But I think part of the reason why that is for me is because not only do I have a life that mirrors this, but Remy is in my life and her life is mirroring it. And it's just like proof all over the place. And same thing with my wife. Bridget is having the same experience to a large degree. And so we're not saying something that's fantastic or unbelievable or untrue or pie in the sky or Pollyanna. This is just practical practice that anyone can do, and anyone has the potential of living the life of their dreams. That's just how it works. Unfortunately, it takes work. It takes work.
But the work is all interior. It's all within yourself. It's all about, checking yourself about why you feel the way you do. When these moments come up, when you are eating something that makes you feel guilty and then feeling guilty, why are you feeling guilty? And why did you eat what you just ate to make you feel guilty? And then why is that a cycle for you? And right, you just start getting deeper and deeper into it, and just one level at a time.
Yep. And we say, now, listen to what I'm about to say. If you have health issues or other issues that require medical attention, we strongly suggest you go and pursue medical attention. So we're not trying to advocate not giving medical attention to things that need medical attention.
Right.
Okay. That being said, you yourself can change any belief that you have. All you have to do is begin with the easy ones, and your inner being will guide you to the difficult ones. Just like with Remy, where Remy has discovered the complex constellation of deeper and deeper stories as a result of starting with the easy ones. So in this exercise that I did with this woman this morning, we started with a really easy exercise. And that easy exercise uncovered all this deep stuff. And it was just like 2 minutes of exercise that uncovered this stuff. And the cool thing is, you don't have to focus on the negative stories to get rid of them. All you have to do is just be aware of them, and your inner being and you will move yourself naturally out of those things. So it's a really easy process, you guys. Okay, let's take a... Thurman, why are you watching this show? Anyway, welcome to the show. So let's see. So Devin is...
So your stories.
So Devin is saying it's scary how deep the stories go.
That's exactly right. Well, yeah.
Now it's interesting, Devin, because that's a story, right? And if you believe that the stories are scary, what's going to happen? You're going to be unlikely to go and examine the stories because you're scared of them. So that story contributes to the unexamined nature of the stories that we have. Who's Laverne? Laverne, welcome to the show. She just wrote a really long comment, it looks like.
Lauren?
Lauren, sorry.
It's like, who's Laverne?
Something else I've noticed is that society, especially the media, tends to focus on the negative to create outrage and influence action. However, whenever certain individuals, myself included, try to look at things in a more positive light, we are called blind and naive. Tell me about it, Lauren. I'm often accused of that. And that's... Go ahead.
Who cares what someone says if they call you blind or naive?
Exactly. Fuck 'em.
You see the truth.
Right. And it's and what I've found, Lauren, is that paying attention to the news makes no sense whatsoever. In fact, the news... So I used to be a journalist. And back in the day when I was a journalist, journalism was really objective. But today, journalism is not objective. And it's not objective because bad news sells. And so it's in the best interest of the news to talk about negative information because negative information sells. And so the question is, why watch these shows when the only one whose interest is being served is the interest of people who are benefiting financially from you watching those negative stories? So stop watching the news. Live in your Pollyanna world, and you'll discover that your Pollyanna world becomes an actual reality in which you're happy. And when you're happy, like we said at the beginning of the show, everything you want comes to you, including that relationship that you think is so elusive.
Right.
Okay, Michael, haven't seen you in so long, dude.
We've got an East Coast friendly time.
Yes. Oh, that's why. Yes. Thank you. Good to see you, my friend. Okay, he says that my life is in a better place than a year ago when I first talked to Perry. Much of it is due to telling myself better stories and being open to accepting more abundance in my life. Absolutely. Oh, Jimmy, welcome to the show. Jimmy was recently on our podcast, and we are in the process of producing that show. It'll come out in a couple weeks. Jimmy and his
oh, yes.
girlfriend of 6 months, V.
Hey.
It was very nice talking with you too. Troy, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Troy says, you're right, Perry. The news is nothing but negative programming. Troy, I'm going to invite you to go back over, say, the last 6 weeks of your Facebook wall and note how many negative things you post on your Facebook wall. Just take a note of that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but consider the possibility that the stories you tell on your Facebook wall are contributing to a certain reality that you don't have to necessarily experience in your daily life. In fact, if all of you want to have some idea of what your life is leading to based on the stories you tell, go and look at your Facebook wall and see how many things of a negative nature you post on there. There's one person Troy, you're a trip, man. There's one person on this show who watches this show regularly. I'm not going to say this person's name, but her wall is a constant series of negative events. Someone's sick, someone's hurting, someone's negatives. It's just one string of negative thing after another. It's not Remy, by the way. But
no, it's not, because all my shit's positive.
Exactly. So if you want an indication of what your future holds for you, look at your Facebook wall and see what kind of things you're posting there. Lauren is right. Believe it or not, if your head is in the sand, or you're singing la la, or only focusing on unicorns and rainbows, there's a strong likelihood that your life is going to turn out the way you want it to. Period.
That's so true. So true.
Okay, so Troy is and the last is saying he doesn't agree with me. Okay. so I knew I was going to get in a little bit of trouble about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're at the top of the hour, so it's time to end the show.
All right.
We will see you next week. And Troy, I'm happy to have a conversation with you about the stuff that's on your wall. Let's talk. I have to go to Costco now and shop for my wife.
Chris, real quick. Kristen says, yes, I've worked hard to change my Facebook wall.
So have I, actually. So have I. Let's see, just take a little more comments while we're here.
I wanted to put out a comment that Troy made earlier about creating how circumstances, our view of a circumstance can create the reality, and how it doesn't have to be something negative. And when you learn something, it can become something positive. And how Troy said something about how the conference has now become not a negative thing for him. His experience at that conference, that we know that story, and how where did a comment go? I can't find it, but
let me see if I can find it.
Lovely comment.
Well, while you're looking for that, let me say, okay, so
I even see value in the drama that happened at the conference.
That was a good comment.
I no longer look at it as a negative experience.
That was a really good comment.
Jonathan says, once you learn from the negativity, is no longer negative, but positive. Learning is always positive. Devin says, is because of the negative stories and maybe your addictions to them.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Jonathan and I became great friends because of that conference.
Jonathan and Troy.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Yeah, so, okay. I'm gonna contact you, Jonathan or Troy, offline, and let's have a talk about this. Because it's easy to, I want to use the D word. It's easy to defend oneself when one is put on the spot in public. And I apologize for doing so. And at the same time, I think there's some opportunity there for learning. Just saying. So I'll reach out to you later. Next week, we have shows lined up all the way through the beginning of summer. Next week, we're going to talk about why it's important for men to love yourself. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. Men loving themselves. And we're not talking in some homoerotic way. All right. Till next week. Bye now.
Ciao.